Hey everyone, in this mini lecture we're going to look at going from writing fractions to decimals and then writing decimals as fractions. First, let's quickly look at the place values for whole numbers and fractions. So if we look at this number, we know that the number on the left over here to the left of the decimal point is the whole number. So we already know those. Let's review them really quickly. So we know that the 6 is in the ones place. We know that the 7 is in the tens place. We know that the 3 is in the hundreds place. And we also know that the 4 is in the thousands place, right? So to the left of the decimal point, you count ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and of course after that is 10,000s, 100,000s, and then millions place. Now let's look at the right side of the decimal point. So to the right of the decimal point we have the decimal places. The numbers are 2, 5, and 8. These are the decimal places. So let's look at those. They start off a little differently. From the right of the decimal point, the decimal places, they start off with tenths. So there's no ones or anything like that. And then it's tens with a THS, so it's tenths. And then they go to hundreds. So we're at hundreds. And then after that, they go to thousands. So thousands. So to the right of the decimal place is always starts, doesn't have it once, it starts with tenths and then hundreds and then the thousands. So the 2 is in the tenths place, the 5 is in the hundreds place, and the 8 is in the thousands place. So this number here is 4,376. The decimal point is like the word and. So 4,376 and 258, you just say the number after the decimal point as you would read it. 258, and then the last number is in the thousands, so you say 258 thousandths. So we say 4,376 and 258 thousandths. All right, so we're gonna now write each fraction as a decimal. So we're given this fraction 16 over 100, or we can say 16 100ths. 16 100ths. So there's not a whole number in front of the fraction, so there won't be anything to the left of the decimal, except maybe we can write a 0 as a placeholder. So there's no whole number, so we can use a 0 as a placeholder. So there's 0 and then here's the fraction, 16 over 100. So 16 100ths, you just write the number 16 as you see it, right? And then you just say to yourself, the last digit has to be in the hundreds place. And let's just count. Tenths place is the 1, 6 is the hundreds place. So that's our answer, 16 hundredths. So we can know it's correct because this is 16 hundredths, 16 over 100, and the 6, the last digit of our decimal, is in the hundreds place, which it must be. The next example says we have the fraction 3 and 9 tenths. So let's write this as a decimal, 3 and 9 tenths. So looking at this, we do have a whole number this time. And if you recall, all whole numbers are written to the left of the decimal point. So this is 3 decimal point, right? Any whole number is written to the left of the decimal point. And then the fraction is the actual decimal numbers. So we have 9 tenths. So when we write this 9, it should be in the tenths place, which it is, because remember, when we count the decimal places, decimals always start with tenths. So this is it, 3 and 9 tenths. Our next example says to rewrite this fraction 2 and 84 1,000ths. 2 and 84 1,000ths. Rewrite that as a decimal. So automatically we see the whole number. So for a decimal, the whole number is always written to the left of the decimal point. So 2 and now we have 84 thousandths. 84 thousandths is the decimal. Because we see 1,000 in the denominator, the last number of the 84 should be in the thousandths place. So let's think about it. We have a tenths place in one blank, hundredths, and then thousandths. So since the 4 should be in the thousandths place, right, then I'm going to make sure I write 84. And then I'll just have to put a 0 in front of the 84. That's the only way I can make the 4 be in the thousandths place, right? So I put a 0 right there. So this is the number, 2 and 84 thousandths. And remember, always remember that the rule says that that last number of your decimal should be in whatever place your denominator says. So that's why our answer is 2.084, because the 4 has to be in the thousandths place. Now, what if it was 2 and 84, let's say 100ths? 2 and 84 100ths. So for this example, 2 and 84 hundredths, we have 2 and 84. Just remember the rule that says if you have the fraction over 10, 100, or 1,000, when you write it as a decimal, that last digit has to be in the place that the denominator says, which is the hundredths for this one. If you look back at the example above, the 84 over 100, then that 4 has to be in the thousandths place because the denominator says so. So that's why we added a 0, and now the 84 and the 4 can be written in the thousandths place. Our next example says 21 and 3 100ths. So we know the 21 is the whole number, so that gets written to the left of the decimal. But now we're looking at the fraction 3 100ths. So the only number is a 3 there, so the 3 has to be in the hundredths place. But remember, with decimals, we count going to the right. That first value is the tenths place, right? And then there's going to be a second value. The second value is the hundredths place, right? Because remember, when you're counting the place values for decimals, they don't ever start with ones. They start with tenths, hundredths, and then thousandths. So we have a 100 there, so the 3 has to be in the hundredths place. So the 3 goes there, and you just insert a 0 in front of it. So 21.03. That really says 21 and 3 hundredths. Our next example says 4 1,000ths. 4 1,000ths. So I don't see a whole number this time. So I will make 0 my whole number, right? Because I don't see a whole number. So 0 is my whole number to the left of the decimal place. But I only see a number 4 in the numerator. But the 4 has to be in the thousandths place. That's what the denominator is telling me. The denominator tells you a lot. It tells you it has to be in the thousandths place. So let's make some blanks as place values. So remember, we start off from the right, and we start with the tenths place, right? The tenths place comes first. Then there's the hundredths place, and then there's the thousandths place, right? The tenths, hundredths. So again, tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. I have those places written out for us. So there's only a 4 in the numerator. So remember, that last digit, well, it's the only digit in the numerator, has to be in the place that the denominator is telling you, which is the thousandths. So we put a 4 right out here, and then put zeros in the other places. And now you just read it as 4, and then look at what place it's in. It's in the thousands. So it's written or read as 4 thousandths. 4 thousandths. So you know you've done it correctly because it sounds just like the fraction 4 thousandths. All right, now let's take a look at now going from decimals to fractions. Decimals to fractions. So here's an idea for you. First, try to read it out and then write it out. So to me, what does this say to you? What does it say? It says 0 and 6 what? 0 and 6 what? Zero and 6 what? Well, what place is it in? What place is it in? We went over place values. Remember, what place is this 6 in? The place values going to the right are tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Well, that's in the tenths place. So this is 0 and 6 tenths. So let's change that to a fraction. Well, when you have 0, you don't write any whole number, but 6 tenths, 0 and 6 tenths, that'll be 6 over 10, 6 tenths. Okay, let's look at our next example. And again, it's important to read it out, which will help you, and then write it out, which would help you. So read it out and write it out. This to the left of the decimal point, we see the number 1. We know the decimal point means and. And then 0.4. If someone wrote down 0.4, what would you tell them the number is? You would say the number is the number 4, right? 0.4 means 4. So then you look at the last digit. The last digit means the digit furthest to the right, which is the 4, and you say, what decimal place is that in? Well, we went through our decimal places before, right? It starts at tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So the 0's in the tenths. The 4 is in the hundredths. Good, it's in the hundredths. So it's 1 and 4 hundredths. So let's rewrite that as a fraction. Well, 1 is the whole number, and 4 is the numerator, but it's 4 hundredths. So we write it over 100. And that's our fraction, 1 and 4 hundredths. Okay, next decimal says 0.375. So we look at that 0, which is our whole number. So we don't have a whole number when we're going to write it as a fraction. Now anything to the right is the decimal, which is the fraction. So how do we say this number? When you see a 3, 7, and a 5, what do you say? Right, you say 375. 375. And now remember the rule. You always look at the last number. The last number and say what is the decimal place for that last number. Well, the 3 is in the tenths, the 7 is in the hundredths, and the 5 is in the what? The thousandths. Correct. So this is how we'll say it, 375, and then whatever place that last number is in, that's going to be what we call it, 375 thousandths. 375 thousandths. Now, all of that was that so we can write it as a fraction. So it makes it easier when we're able to say it and then write it out in words, because now the fraction is 375. We write the number 375, right? 375. And then this tells us to write it over 1,000. 375 thousandths. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. We have 0 decimal point 001. So we have a 0 to the left of the decimal point, so the whole number is 0. So we won't even need to write a whole number when we write this as a fraction. And now 001. 001, when you see that on a piece of paper, what does that really mean? That just really means 1. All right, so let's look at the place values. That first 0 is in the tens place, right? Because when you go with place values from the right of the decimal point, it doesn't ever start with ones like the normal ones for whole numbers, right? Decimal place values start with tenths, and then we go to hundredths, and then we go to thousandths. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay, so we said that this is 1, right? So 1. And then you always remember the rule. The rule says look at that last number. That last number and the place that it's in tells you what to write. That's 1 thousandths. 1 thousandths. So let's just write it as a fraction. 1 thousandths is 1 over 1,000. 1 thousandths. So here it is. 1 thousandths. 1 over 1,000 makes 1 thousandths.